The transgender debate has reached a new front with the inauguration of Sarah Macbride, who is a transgender congressperson coming out of Delaware, a biological man who has transitioned into a woman by his belief, and Nancy Mace, who is a congresswoman from South Carolina, who is making an issue over the prospect of McBride potentially using the Congressional Women's Bathroom, which Mace and many others are saying would be a threat to their rights and also a threat to their safety. And this entire saga has played out like a theatrical production. There's been a lot of theatrics on both sides. There's been a lot of screaming. There's been a lot of hand-wringing. But I want to get to the fundamental question, what is the truth here and how should we see this? Because it's very easy for moments in our culture to be flashes in the pan that attract our attention, that gin up the algorithms, and that push us towards a certain disposition that we may end up changing eventually because we didn't arrive at that point through any sound thinking that would leave us to be concrete in our convictions, but instead we arrive there by basis of emotion. That can happen, and that happens often. But in order for us to actually deal with these issues in a long-standing way, in a way that provides for the preservation of rights and society, and in a way that defends, most importantly, the truth, we have to look at these concepts with clarity, and we must deal with them with clarity. So in this video, I'm going to go over the saga that's been happening that I mentioned a moment ago, and I'm going to analyze it by zooming out and analyzing the transgender question in general, and hopefully we'll be able to reach some point of clarity on this matter, hopefully a point that can help us as a society move forward on this terrain. Before we get into that, my friends, how are you doing well? I'm Christian Moss. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, then I must implore you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can, my friends, to ensure our channel is successful, even if you disagree with me. We are almost at 20,000 subscribers. I'm so excited, my friends. If you enjoy uncommon angles on the issues of the day, if you enjoy thinking it deeper, if you enjoy contemplating the ideas that underpin our civilization that are not always upheld by those who engage in debate, then I would encourage you to please subscribe, please like. This is the channel you want to be at. Now, please enjoy the video. So, Nancy Mace versus Sarah Macbride, which is truly a matter of the transgender question versus the concrete realities in which it exists in. So, Nancy Mace, upon notice that Sarah Macbride would be in Congress, immediately sprung into action and proposed legislation and began talking about the prospect of Sarah Macbride actually being able to use the women's restroom, to which Nancy Mace is saying a resounding no. Now, the reason this is particularly important is for a few reasons. Number one, Sarah Macbride is the first transgender congressperson elected to Congress, which is rather unprecedented, and that causes new questions to arise. That's number one. Number two, Sarah Macbride as an individual in the past has made a habit of violating certain norms in pursuit of their ideology. For example, Sarah Macbride made a social media post where they stood in a woman's bathroom, despite being a biological male. They stood in a woman's bathroom, and they took a picture of themselves and said, "I'm in your bathroom, I'm in your space, I own this now." Now, part of me wonders if Sarah Macbride had not been so militant and activist in their disposition in the past, if Nancy Mace's reaction would be different, or if the reaction of many other Americans that are coming to her defense would be different. But I digress. That's a secondary matter, and a matter ultimately of taste, but it's one that I think we should all consider. So Nancy Mace herself has been going to extremes on this, in my opinion. She has been tearing down transgender flags in the halls of Congress.
So what is this?
This says you can't erase us, Nancy. Well, then you shouldn't try to erase women. That's all I have to say for any man that wants to be in a woman's restroom, bathroom, dressing room, locker room. Absolutely not.
She has been saying no, male penises in my bathroom. No, well, all penises are male, I guess, but you guys see what I'm saying. She's been saying a lot of different things.
Hey guys, I am at the airport making my way back home to the low country in South Carolina. I just spoke at an event with a couple hundred people. Some trans lunatic tried to rush the stage and attack me. And he is just making the case for me that we don't want penises in women's spaces. F off. And I just had a woman come up to me and get in my face about it, and I told her to F right off. I'm not going to tolerate it. And I'm going to fight harder and bigger than ever before. I will be the giant you can't take out, and you can't bully me into submission.
She's been making these videos where she just walks around like in a very uptight posture and she asserts herself. And while a lot of her critics are attacking her because of style, for example, Katie Couric said that she was being mean. And while I do think Mace is being very belligerent, theatrics aside, tone aside, I think the substance of what she's trying to get at is actually quite righteous and it deserves our consideration. And it's a very simple fact. Her position presupposes several ideas. Number one, it presupposes that there are limitations that are worth preserving that allow us to gain meaning, and that is limitations around biological reality, around the sexes. Number two, that those limitations give rise to certain concrete areas, certain environments that ought to be protected and preserved in their name. Women's bathrooms, men's bathrooms, women's sports, male sports. Number three, that no matter your sensibilities, the truth, or at least your understanding of it, is worth defending and putting out there public critique, which is a virtue, by the way. It's a virtue to subject yourself in the way Mace is, public critique. But what I think Mace's approach misses, and this is where I'm going to be critical, is that it leaves the fundamental question unanswered. And by leaving the question unanswered, it does two things. Number one, it confuses the debate because we don't know what we're talking about. And number two, it leaves Mace open up to the criticism that she somehow hates people who are transgender or claim to be transgender. The question that I'm talking about is the question around transgenderism. See, whenever you critique a position or an ideology or a philosophy or a predisposition, you must have two things in mind. Number one, you must understand what you're critiquing. To understand what you're critiquing, you must understand the topic itself. Number two, you must be able to put yourself in the shoes of those you're critiquing so as to understand their worldview in an intimate way. And number three, you must be able to charitably construe their arguments. In other words, you should be able, like classical debaters are trained, like Demosthenes and Cicero and all the other people of antiquity were able to do, put yourself in the shoes of the position that you oppose and try to make the best case for it. We call this, in logic, steelmanning. That's not happening here. And the fact that's not happening here is, I think, not a fault of Mace, but rather a product of the kind of epistemically dead environment we exist in, where these higher questions are ignored in favor of simplistic explanations and in favor of sort of bombshell, sensationalistic antics that get all the clicks, whereas the more substantive explorations don't. But today we're going to attempt to do just that. We're going to try to answer this question and do so in a way that is immensely relevant to this issue. As I mentioned, the transgender debate is happening on two fronts. Number one, it's happening on the front of in Congress over the bathrooms, and generally over the bathrooms in general as well. Number two, it's happening in terms of women's sports. Now, the women's sports issue is a separate issue that I will address, although you'll find that the position I articulate in this video will be applicable to that issue as well. But let's first talk about bathrooms in Congress and transgenderism in general. The question we have to ask ourselves is two things. How do we treat transgenderism, number one? And number two, how do we treat rights claims of rights that some transgenders have made upon society? So by my estimation, there are two ways of seeing transgenderism, but only one is correct. One is seeing transgenderism as a state of being. The other is seeing transgenderism as a condition of being. I'll elaborate. A state of being is a mood or a disposition or an attitude we have at a particular time that is not fixed or set in stone. In other words, it is fleeting. So for example, if you are depressed, it is a state of being. If you are happy, it is a state of being. If you are anxious, it is a state of being. If you are concerned, it is a state of being. These are things that come and go. And states of being, I think, reflect the dynamism of the human spirit. It reflects our ability to adapt, our ability to reckon with the world in all kinds of different ways. And it reflects, most importantly, the basis of our moral sense, which is our ability to perceive beauty and perceive goodness and evil in terms of how things should be as we understand them as human beings. So I think there's a lot of good things about states of being. But the problem is, states of being are nothing to base a conviction off of. They are not really intelligible beyond that particular moment. And most importantly, states of being can change depending on environment. So it is very, very important not to give them too much stock. Whereas a condition of being is much more intimate. A condition of being does not say much about how you feel at that moment or what you're interacting with. It says everything about who you are. What is the condition of my being? I am for example, a human being. I am endowed with reason. I'm rational. I have a mind. I can think. I'm a thinking being. A condition of being tells something about the essence of someone, and that is much more permanent, and that is much more fixed. One could even say, for example, that certain elements we get are conditions of being. If you are, for example, permanently blind, that's a condition of being. It doesn't change who you are as a human being, does not negate your value, but it's a condition of being insofar as it's an essential part of who you are. You are a blind person. Very simple. So on and so forth. So conditions of being are much more affixed. Now, a lot of people try to claim that transgenderism belongs in the latter category. A lot of people try to claim that transgenderism is a condition of being. And if transgenderism is a condition of being, then that has a bunch of different moral implications that it being a state of being does not have. If transgenderism is a condition of being, then that means a few things. Number one, it's permanent. Number two, it's fixed upon something solid, some sound basis. And most importantly, number three, it is a fundamental part of who somebody is. Now, somebody may believe their identity is a fundamental part of who they are as a condition of being. It may very well be. But when their identity is something that emerges not from values, but instead emerges from, in most cases, a certain tension within you about who you are, emerges from whether it be some kind of mental problem, whether it be uncertainty about yourself, when it emerges from something like that, it is not a wise idea to stake your condition of being off of that. Most importantly, I think it's another thing to say this. If transgenderism is a state of being, then that simply means it's a form of expression. And if it's a form of expression, here's the best thing about this. If it's a form of expression, then society is not required to treat it in any other way different than we treat somebody who wishes to wear ripped Levi jeans, than we treat somebody who wishes to dye their hair pink or brown, than we treat somebody who is depressed. Society is not bound to treat you in a way that is fundamentally different on the basis of your state of being, so long as your state of being does not translate into harm against someone else or some other kind of moral catastrophe. If it is simply a state of being that comes and flows, that ebbs and flows, then it really has no moral bearing on how society treats you, and it also has no moral bearing on how you should demand things of society. If transgenderism is a matter of expression, which I fundamentally believe it is, then I really see no issue with it insofar as someone is simply expressing their desire to be the opposite sex, to be the opposite gender, and they wish to conform their outward appearance to fit that. It doesn't change who they fundamentally are. It's not a condition of being. It's a state of being. It's an expression of being. And that's, for my opinion, I'm agnostic on it because it doesn't come with any rights claims. But the moment you say that it is a state of being is the moment you try to, in my opinion, make what is something permanent, something much more than it actually should be. And this is the fundamental problem. If transgenderism is a condition of being, then that means that you can demand things of society. You can demand that you want to have this space open up to you. You can demand that if people go against your condition of being, they're going against your humanity. You can demand so many different things, and people would be obligated to follow them. And this is the fundamental problem. When you treat a state of being as a condition of being, and most people do not see your state of being as a condition of being, and they instead see it differently, then that therefore means there's going to be a gulf in how people treat you. There's going to be a gulf in how folks think about you. Having said that, the other thing we have to consider is that the way we talk about this is going to be very important. I mentioned, for example, that Mace was mean and she was a little bit nasty. we have to approach these issues with goodwill and with liberality. They are both intellectual virtues. They are both virtues that our founders were talked about a lot. George Washington explicitly mentioned in 1790 that the liberality of sentiment was the best thing about American society. Goodwill is essentially how we can see our desire for the good in somebody else and will their highest good for them. And these are things that are very important in establishing basic humanity, because no good debate can happen without first establishing basic humanity and desire to seek the truth. And if you seek the truth, you must also see the truth about your fellow man, and that is they are a human being. So regardless of whether it's a condition of being or a state of being, goodwill and liberality must dictate the conversation, not pretending as if someone struggling with their kind of self-expression should be chastised or attacked or insulted. And this may not be a very popular position, but it's the right position. Because ultimately, states of being, as I mentioned, are things that are ultimately subjective. They have no strong objective standard, and therefore they should be relegated to the realm of the personal. The person should be able to deal and express their states of being how they want without trying to impose requests upon society. That is what this debate ultimately comes down to. So because transgenderism is a matter of expression, because transgenderism oftentimes, if it appears physically, appears in the form of people conforming their appearance to the opposite sex, whether that be through how they present themselves or whether that be through actual physiological alterations like hormone therapy, whatever it be. For these reasons, it cannot be a condition of being because it is not permanent, it is not fixed, it is not the essence of somebody in any firm way beyond what they decide to make it their expression. And so then this should inform us about how we deal with these particular issues. Because this is not a condition of being, and because there are no special right claims for this kind of form of expression, as there really should be, or really are for no form of expression, because expression itself is not a moral value. Expression itself is simply a personal habit, not a moral value. It's a different category. There can be no expectation that bathrooms will conform to whoever decides to use them. Bathrooms, or whatever other public facility, or any other facility in general, should conform to, number one, who is supposed to use them, and number two, to who runs the bathrooms and how they decide those bathrooms should be distributed. Some people may want to have a unisex bathroom, which is be totally fine. Others may say no, they're going to have a male bathroom and one bathroom. And those standards must be respected, because being a woman or being a man is, both of those things are a condition of being, and there are predators that seek to exploit, to harm people of a certain condition of being, and the fundamental right that all of us as human beings have is to be protected in our persons. That is the foundation of every self-governing society. That is the way forward for this transgenderism debate, in my opinion. Recognizing these categorical distinctions, making the categorical distinction in a smart way, doing it with compassion, doing it with love, avoiding the theatrics, and most importantly, understanding how conditions of being inform rights claims and how states of being simply don't really inform rights claims, simply inform how one seeks to govern their own self. When we understand that, we can understand the transgenderism debate, and we can do so in a way that I think is fruitful. So in closing, my friends, this does not have to be a conversation that leads to anger, but it does lead to anger. This does not have to be a conversation that leads to strife. This has to be a conversation where we say, the reality is what it is, and it is what it isn't. And your personal expression is really none of my business until you decide to make it my business by trying to force me or force society to go along with it. And then we have to really ask the question, am I obligated to go along with this? To which the resounding answer is no. I'm obligated to respect you and to have goodwill towards you. But beyond that, your rights claims begin and end at that point. And at that point, when we recognize that, I think we're going to have much more clarity on this issue. And we'll be able to deal with this much more humanely than some people have been doing. But until then, I'm afraid this debate is going to continue to be quite bombastic, but hopefully a solution will be reached eventually. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.